Shall we go? Even if they wanted to wait until everyone arrived to start eating, Henry's house wasn't big enough to hold them all. For that reason, if the weather was cooperative, they took their meals outdoors. Doing it this way meant that a bit of a ruckus was tolerable too. If everyone had been inside, Henry's patience would have dried up sooner. Still, it was too loud. So this is what I am saying: the boss lady is going to be my wife. Hey, did you forget our agreement that you wouldn't aim for her? Yeah, if you're going to make a move, then so am I. What? I am first. Several goblins kicked aside their chairs and stood up. A few others jumped onto the table. Henry held her anger back and called out to them kindly, "Please calm down, everyone." But the fire in the goblin's eyes wouldn't be extinguished. Struggling is futile, brothers. This game has already been decided. Behold this gleaming meat. Enshrined on the spoon, one of the goblins, Kunaru, held aloft, was a piece of chicken that at first glance resembled a bean. It was so small that Henry couldn't be blamed for missing it. She also didn't recognize it as meat while trying to serve equal portions. I ate my meat already, but I found more at the bottom of my bowl. Did you guys have any extra meat in your bowls? You didn't, did you? In other words, this is love. Give me a break. She just mistook it for a bit of vegetable. Or maybe you were just imagining things. What you ate before was actually a potato. And the only meat you got was that puny nub. Careful, you might creep her out. Remember, our God says thou shalt make Henry happy. Your God is probably an evil one, Connor. Half the goblins got up. The rest cheered and heckled them on from their seats. Nemu was one of the hecklers. A few people remained outside these groups and focused on the table. Enfire was a prime example. Ruby powder, magic feathers, a pestle made in tonelico, a mortar, a more. He was mumbling something vacantly while working his spoon. As soon as he put soup in his mouth, it returned to his plate. His hair covered his eyes, but his gaze likely flitted between the real world and a fantasy. NFI, are you okay? If she didn't do something about the goblins, she wasn't sure how heated their argument would get. Enfire was acting strange, so she couldn't leave him alone either. He probably hadn't slept in a long time. The moment he sat down, his focus fractured even more, scattering in every direction. By the time they started eating, he was missing so much vitality and intelligence it was like an undead had joined the table. Yes, Henry Soup, whoa, NFI, wake up. Where NT you the one who was saying Nemu for life? Things are different now. Nemu is 10 and about as tall as us, so I thought she was a young lady. Then I learned that humans apparently aren't considered adults until they reach 15. Hey, are you serious? So boss lady and the others aren't hobhumans or something? The goblin's boisterous conversation moved along quickly. Henry was about to ask what a hobhuman was, but they grew tired of teasing and happened upon a new argument. Ah, you stole my bread. My wolf is hungry. Don't be stingy. Everyone. Henry raised her voice, but it was drowned out by the clamor. Spoons and plates flew even as shouts and jeers raged. They were throwing empty dishes, so no food went to waste. But it wasn't behavior she could let slide. Henry finally steeled her resolve, furrowed her eyebrows and inhaled. I am pretty sure wolves are carnivorous. You might be higher level, but don't kid yourself about how you fare in a real melee battle. Very interesting. How about I remind you what you had for dinner last night? The moment Henry leaped to her feet, they all returned to their seats in a single wave of motion. They began eating politely. Would you please quiet down? Her shout reverberated around the silent table. Oh, she looked about blankly. They all wore faces that said we were just quietly eating breakfast. Something wrong, and you were disturbing us with your sudden outburst. After a moment of stillness, Henry blushed and sat down heavily. PFT, ha ha ha. The first one to break the silence was Nemu. Then Henry cracked up, holding her stomach. The goblins practically fell out of their chairs laughing. Their timing had been amazing. They had probably planned it all out in detail at a meeting beforehand, maybe even rehearsed. It was hilarious that they would put so much earnest effort into something so silly. Ah, it's too funny. Were you all aiming for that from the beginning? She laughed so hard that she was still wiping tears out of the corners of her eyes while she asked, pretending to be annoyed. Of course, boss lady, we'd never make such a big fuss about things like that. What he said, ma am, quite right, quite right. They bragged and frustrated her line of questioning with their usual jokey grins, not a hint of guilt on their faces. But Henry narrowed her focus to Kaijari and stared at him. He seemed to grow uncomfortable and averted his eyes before mumbling an evasive answer. Well, I guess you seem kind of down this morning, boss lady. You guys, after all, we ray your bodyguards. That's right. Yeah, we ray your bodyguards. We even came up with a pose for when we appear on the scene. Oh yeah, so we put you and Nemu in the middle like this, what? Me too, of course. Then you raise your arms majestically like this, even describing it in the kindest way possible. He seemed like a frog tipped over on its back. ILL pass, I think. I don't really know what you mean by bodyguards in the first place. Yes, so strange, don't you think? She turned to her old friend for help, but no one was there. On a hunch, she lowered her eyes and found him sprawled on the table, face down in his soup. NFI, her face went pale as she shouted and picked him up. Connor rushed over at once and pried the exhausted Enfire's eyes open with his fingers. Yes, only sleeping. If we let him sleep until around noon, he'll be fine. NFI, what will we do with you? She piggybacked him and set off for a bedroom in her house where she would let him sleep. She could hear voices behind her. Isn't it normally the other way around? Let us not say anything, Nemu. Boss man, once the village harvested the wheat, the tax collector would come to the village. Henry wondered how she would explain the goblins. Should she just say we summoned them? Maybe she can call them her underlings. Or Henry thought about how they were always being considerate of her. They didn't merely protect her, but also understood her feelings. She wondered what she could do for them. The goblins were pretty noisy, but they were reliable too. They were her new family. There had to be something she could do for them. Henry wiped the sweat dripping down the nape of her neck with the clean back of her hand as she gathered up the weeds she had pulled out. There were quite a lot of weeds, and the crushed grass gave off a green smell. After hours out in the field, her sweat-soaked clothes clung to her. She felt gross and tired. She stretched her back to refresh her mood. Spreading out before her was a field. The heads of the wheat plants she'd sown were filling out. As the harvesting season drew closer, the wheat would turn gold. It was quite a sight when the entire field turned completely golden, but before that, she had to perform the chore of weeding. If she didn't take care of the weeds before then, the color wouldn't be as fine. Now was the time for that suffering. Stretching her back helped relieve some tension and stiffness. Her body was warm from working in the field. The breeze felt great. The gust brought something else, noise from the village. She could hear hammering. She also heard chants to help the laborers focus, things she had never heard before. They were working on a variety of projects. The most important was building a wall and a watchtower. This would further fortify the village. Khan was near the Tove woodlands. The forest was a threatening place where monsters dwelled. It was impossible to live safely near it without sturdy fortifications. Their village had houses lined up on level ground. It also had a square in the middle, but it didn't have defenses. Anyone could walk right in. Their arrangements had worked for a while. Although they were near the woodlands, no monsters came near them. That was thanks to the wise king of the forest's territory within the forest. No monsters would traverse its domain, so the villagers were as safe as if they had been protected by an iron wall. But that safeguard was undone by human hands. Imperial knights had attacked the settlement, killing their loved ones. No one thought they would be safe any longer. That was why the goblin leader Jujimu's proposal to fortify the village, he mentioned they might not be able to protect everyone if they came under attack again, was adopted unanimously. They were still tormented by unforgettable nightmares. First, they broke down houses no one was living in anymore and used the wood for the wall. That wasn't enough, so they needed to cut down some trees from the woodlands. If they went deep into the woods, they ran the risk of entering the wise king of the forest's territory, so they skirted along the edge. The goblins served as their escorts naturally. Through all this cooperation, the villagers' wariness of the goblins virtually disappeared. Perhaps the knights, being fellow humans who killed the villagers, was a contributing factor. Their own kind had robbed them of their lives and loved ones. In contrast, the goblins, despite being a different race, worked under Henry to help the village. It wasn't right to place trust in others based on whether they were from the same race or not. Most of all, the goblins were powerful. Goblin warriors posted as lookouts, and even if they got hurt, the goblin cleric Connor would heal them. It was hard to dislike them when they were so nice. Thus, in a few short days, the goblins put down roots in the village and became an irreplaceable presence there. One glance at their house was enough to understand. Despite belonging to a different race, they were living in a big new house built for them right near Henry's. The villagers and the goblins worked together on the defense plan. Unfortunately, they were short on hands, so at first they'd been able to build only a simple fence. It was at precisely the point that the wise king of the forest, who had been acting as a breakwater for the village, abandoned its territory to follow a masterful warrior in black armor. Everyone had worked so hard to finish the fence. They lamented that it would never be enough to keep them safe, but now they were protected by a great wall. Things had taken a turn for the better when a peerless beauty arrived. She said she was one of the village's savior, Aints Ulgaun's maids. She brought some stone golems to their homes. Golems were strangers to exhaustion. They silently followed orders and possessed far more power than humans. Since they were a little clumsy, the golems couldn't be trusted with detailed work, but their help shortened building times by an unbelievable degree. With golems working without sleep or rest, the construction of the wall advanced rapidly. It would have been impossible for the villagers and the goblins to perform such a vast amount of labor on their own. But the golems finished it. They felled a huge number of trees and dug the gigantic hole to properly sink the foundation. The wall that would normally take several years to complete was built in a few days. Moreover, it was longer, taller, and sturdier than originally planned. They made progress on not only the wall, but also the lookout towers. Thanks to that, the village had towers in both the east and west. "Boss lady, I am done over here too." Henry's thoughts were interrupted when Pepo, the goblin who was weeding with her, called out, "Oh, thank you. No need." Pepo waved her off. His hands were still filthy with dirt and plant juices, but she didn't feel like she could ever thank him enough. It was hard for her to maintain her house's fields after losing her mother and father. Normally someone from the village would help, but with the dearth of workers, everyone had their hands full with their own fields. But when the goblins started helping her, the problem was solved, and Henry wasn't the only one getting assistance. Henry heard someone calling for her and turned around to find a plump woman standing there. Next to her was a goblin. "Henry, dear. Oh, thanks so much. I finished up my field with the help of Mr. Goblin. That's great." Everyone volunteered to cooperate. "Please thank them directly." "Oh, I thanked Mr. Goblin already. He said they were just underlings and wanted me to thank their boss lady." Henry's face twinged at the mention of boss lady, but she turned it into a grin. The goblins had offered to help out households who lost workers in the attack. The woman before her was from one such family. Who could begrudge such considerate goblins? They were better neighbors than some of the humans in Khan. Naturally, those sorts of stories got around and had resulted in everyone's current high opinion of the little monsters. "By the way, where are the other goblins? I thought I'd treat them to a meal as a thank you. The others are either working security or helping out the new arrivals, but I'll let them know." "Oh, well then, please pass the message along, Henry dear. I'll make something special." "I suppose I'll treat this one now." "Really? Then I humbly accept your offer. Sorry, boss lady, but I'll be over at Mrs. Mulger's." When Henry nodded, the woman and the goblin next to her set off walking back toward the village. "I just hope all the people who agreed to move here will understand that you're not evil." They looked pretty spooked when we first laid eyes on one another. "It seems like they counted us among their enemies," replied Pepo. "I guess in other frontier villages, it's normal to consider subhumans enemies. That's why we offering to help out so much. It's tricky though. But they coming around, aren't they? A little while ago I saw someone say hello like normal. Well, the transplants have memories just like the people here do of being attacked and having their families killed. No, maybe their burdens are even heavier. Khan's fate was brutal, but even so, about half the villagers survived. Some villages had almost their entire populations killed by the knights. The people who had responded to Khan's call for new settlers were survivors from those villages. A silence fell upon the pair. Henry gave her back another good stretch and looked up at the sky. The noon bell hadn't rung yet, but it was almost time. She was at a good stopping point in her field work. "Okay, should we have lunch?" She was familiar enough with Pepo's squashed-looking face to see that he put on a cheerful smile. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Your cooking is delicious, boss lady." "No, it's not." She laughed, blushing. No, really. Competition for the job of helping you in the field is fierce, because we all want to eat your tasty food." "Ah, then why don't I just make food for everyone, like we do at breakfast?" Cooking for 2 was the same as cooking for 20 or not. Cutting up the ingredients for that many portions was a job in and of itself. 1 or 2 pots would never be enough. It would take quite a lot of work, but when she considered how much she owed the goblins, it didn't feel like any trouble at all. No, that's okay. Eating your food is a perk for the one who beats out the competition. Henry smiled at the little grinning subhuman, not sure what to do. She knew the goblins had been playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who got to help her. She wasn't sure her cooking was worthy of such a fuss. Okay, shall we head back and eat? Sounds good. Having said that much, Papo suddenly shut his mouth. He looked into the distance with his keen eyes. Henry gasped at the stark shift from funny little subhuman to seasoned warrior. She followed his gaze. There was a goblin riding a black wolf. It seemed to glide across the meadow toward the village. It's Kyume. The goblin troop Henry had summoned comprised 12 level 8 goblins, 2 level 10 goblin archers, 1 level 10 goblin mage, 1 level 10 goblin cleric, 2 level 10 goblin riders, and 1 level 12 goblin leader. That made a total of 19 goblins. Kaijari, whom she had seen that morning, and Papo, who had been helping her in the field, were level 8 goblins. A level 10 goblin rider, Kyume, was coming toward them now. He was in furry leather armor and mounted on a pitch black wolf. The goblin riders were tasked with riding around the meadow and acting as an early warning system. It was common to see them return to the village for regular reports. Yeah, but Papo's voice was tense. Something wasn't sitting right with him. That was the feeling she got. What's wrong? It's a little early. He was supposed to be on watch out toward the woodlands. Did something happen? Hearing Papo's explanation, Henry felt worry well up inside her, fear that another bloody attack was nearing. As the pair watched in silence, the large wolf carrying Kyume raced toward them. The wolf's ragged breath spoke volumes about how hard they must have rushed over. What is it? In response to Papo's question, Kyume, still on his wolf, bobbed his head to Henry and answered, "Something seems to have happened out near the woodlands." Something? I don't really know. It's not like before when a big bunch of guys were heading north. Do you mean knights? Henry interrupted without thinking. Even though she knew she couldn't be of any use in this situation, she had to ask. She couldn't shake the fear from the day the village was attacked. The other group the goblins mentioned had numbered in the thousands, leaving tracks behind as they headed north. The footprints were human size, but the goblins concluded they weren't human because they appeared to be barefoot. I am not sure, but I don't think it's knights. It seems something happened deep in the woods. Oh, she sighed in relief, even though she didn't really mean to. Well, for now I'll report to our leader. All right, nice work, thank you. They waved, and Kyume ran off on his wolf. They watched him go until he slipped through the slowly opened village gate. Well, shall we go back? Yeah. After washing up at the well, Henry and Papo arrived home. A young girl's voice called out to them, "Welcome back, Henry." Along with the greeting, they heard the scraping noise of 2 rocks grinding together. They looked and saw Nemu using the stone mill in the shade of the house. The pungent smell that prickled Henry's nose was wafting from the mill. It resembled the aroma that had been clinging to her hands earlier, but it was twice as strong enough to pick up even from a distance. Nemu was already used to it, so it wasn't a problem for her. But when the smell hit Henry, tears sprang into the corners of her eyes. Nothing in particular happened to Papo's expression. It wasn't clear if a racial trait had spared him, or perhaps he simply thought it would be rude to make a strange face in front of his master's younger sister. "We ran back. How did it go? Did you get them crushed properly?" "Yep, perfect." Look, Nemu eyed her results with a satisfied smile. Of the mound of herbs that had been there when Henry went out, only a tiny few were left. "Amazing, right? I am practically done." Nemu had been turning the herbs into a paste. Then she was stuffing them into a jar, the way Henry had requested. Most herbs were stored by either drying or grinding them up, depending on the type. "Wow, you worked hard, Nemu." In response to Henry's unreserved praise, Nemu looked a bit proud. She also blushed. At some point, she had either been trained by Enfira, or perhaps she had simply decided she wanted to help her sister out. Her work had improved, becoming both thorough and swift. Herbs were an important source of revenue for Khan. It took a lot of work to live in a frontier village. This was arguably their home's only specialty product. It was an indispensable way of acquiring money, so the villagers knew where to find abundant clusters of all different sorts of herbs. Henry thought to herself quietly, This herb boasted one of the best profits out of all the various types that the villagers foraged. But because the plants developed medicinal properties only right before they flowered, they could be relied on for only supplemental income. The villagers had already picked clean all the clusters they knew about, but it was possible that if they pushed a little farther into the forest, there were still untouched clusters. Of course, monsters stalked the woodlands. Henry couldn't just stroll in as if she was going on a picnic. But now she had the goblins alongside her, plus Enfira, who had a wealth of experience gathering herbs. If she asked for their help, they would probably be able to earn a nice bit of money. After hesitating for a moment, Henry broached the topic with Pepo.